Good morning. Welcome. This is Angela Coulter, your Consciousness Transformation Ascension Guide, originator of Trinity Energy Progression, bringing you this week's Living the Shift. I wanted to talk this week about where we're putting our energy. There's a lot of it being thrown around right now, in the United States especially, but actually, our elections, our political elections, are a very small part of this, but it's a very timely way of talking about it because we have a lot going on. So we have political unrest. Excuse me. We still have fear out there with the virus. We have a lot of disagreement going on, a lot of what we call shadow stuff coming up to the surface. And so there's a lot of distractions in our day-to-day lives if we allow them to be, right? So what's going on and what I want to talk about today is we have sort of lost ourselves in general, collectively, into what we put our energy into. And it's something that we don't even realize we're doing. We don't even realize that it's taking up a lot of our energy, a lot of our focus, distracting us from actually what we could do to create a better life for ourselves. And it's just, I'm working on a course with my Monday morning partner, Sarah C. Avignoni, called Immunity Consciousness, on Ascended World. And we've been doing the modules because it's an online course. We've been doing the modules and just talking about what we're putting our energy to and how it really does affect us, in so many different ways. But what's come up in conversation too has been how much energy we're putting into things that really there's nothing we can do about it, right? So one part of what we do in terms of consciousness and meditation and everything else is talk about becoming present and where we are right this moment. A great book about that I really loved, and I read it years ago. I haven't read it since, but it was like back in about 2000, early 2000s, is Eckhart Tolle's The Power of Now. And so it's a great book that just talks about presence. It talks about being in the here and now and that there's nothing else and all that kind of stuff. I talk about that a lot in the context of what I teach with Trinity Energy Progression, but and in other consciousness topics, many of them. When we really step out of everything and we look at where we are right now, the only thing that there is that really exists is right now. If we are worried about the future, right, that's taking us out of right now. If we are worried about the past or fretting about the past or regretting the past or having anger or blame or whatever or shame about the past, that's not living in the present. And as we become more conscious, part of what we start focusing on more is remembering how to be present in a way. When people say, oh, be present, part of it is saying, well, what is there right now for me to do? What is there right now for me to be? Because all of those other things don't exist. They only exist in our minds. The only thing that really exists is where we are, where we're standing right now. And, later on we get into a much bigger perspective of actually everything is just sort of right now. Good morning, Gloria. And so when we get to that state, we start to really look into our presence. So we talk about many things I talk about. So let's sort of back up because there's so many different ways to go with this. And when I got that this was the topic for this morning, it was like, okay, so let me just be directed, please, because there's so many ways I could go with this. But when I talk about consciousness and I talk about what we're doing on our path and doing our own energy work and shifting ourselves so that we can remember how to come from a space of love. One of the first things I talk about is how it's none of your business what other people think of you, because what other people think of you is where they are in their journey. It has nothing to do with you, right? So you could do everything, the most well-intentioned. You could get vilified and blamed and shamed or whatever by somebody else because of where they are in their journey, but it has nothing to do with you. And so what I talk about is coming from a place of love, coming to a place of love within ourselves. Because here's the thing. Think about how many things So, all right. There are so many times I've worked with people who have come to a place of of creating their biggest fears, right? And they put so much energy to, by the way, part of what we talk about is more that we put in our intention to, we create. So when we fear something and we put so much attention on how it could look, how it could be, or whatever, we're actually creating it. Number one, right? Number two is a lot of times we spend all this time worrying about something, then it doesn't happen, right? Or we do finally manifest our worst, our worst fears. And I went through this period several years back where I had a number of clients that were doing that. They were all manifesting their worst fears, all like came up all like together. It was such a bizarre several weeks. Phone calls constantly. And so every time I ask them that, and my own personal experience too has been, every time I've asked them that, or when I've had that happen to me, pretty much every time it happens. Okay, so now that it's happened, what do you say? Well, you deal with it, right? You deal with what's in front of you, and then afterward you're like, oh, well, that wasn't even as bad as I anticipated. Right, because you're putting so much energy around this possible creation, and you're putting all these scenarios around it, and you're putting all this emotion around it. You're putting this energy to this creation, right? And you give it more of a chance to be created, but also but then it doesn't have to be created either. It's all about quantum physics and potential and all that kind of stuff. We can talk about that for hours. But so what if we took all of our energy away from A, what isn't in the now, right? And B, everybody else's business. And we pretty much focused on, what if we just focused on coming to a space of unconditional self-love just for ourselves, right? I guarantee you, if we all did that, all of everything that's crumbling and we have problems with and everything else would cease to exist, and we would just simply be in a much different place of peace and harmony, centeredness. Because if we're all part of what causes all of these things are these what we call ego-based energies, which are separation-based energies, right? Anger, fear, anxiety, judgment, guilt, doubt, sorrow, pain, shame, all that. Anything that I call exclusive, and it's like projecting, it's a we versus them, it is me versus everyone else or whatever. And then we start projecting. So here's the thing, in our working consciousness, we look at that, we look at how what we have inside of us is what reflects back to us. And if we are triggered by something that's reflecting back to us, it's something inside of us. Again, that's why what everybody thinks is only their own business and nobody else's, because it's only what's going on inside of you that causes you to react a certain way. So if you're triggered, so for example, if somebody comes up to you, like if there's somebody who really triggers you, gets you really angry for no apparent reason, even though they did something really minor, then there's something to look at within yourself. There was someone who came to me a while ago who is prominent spiritual coach like me in the community, and wanted to talk privately and do a session, and the person was talking about another person in the community who they had started out together. They had done some courses together, and then the other one went off on their own and apparently stopped like returning phone calls and all that kind of stuff. But used a lot of the course material that they had worked on together. And this person was very angry and wanted me to really judge the other person, because I knew the other person as well, just a small community. And so I never really passed any judgment, because it's not for me to pass any judgment. There are two sides to everything. There's individual journey to everything, right? So you could have 5 people in one spot having a common experience, and you'll have 5 different recounts of what happened. And they're all truth. They're all accurate, because it's all from how it's seen. There's an old proverb about that, about like the five blind men and a elephant. Describe the elephant. We'll give it like completely different, explanations or something like that. descriptions. That's how we are in our own journeys, right? So when we start to look at it that way, and we stop looking at things from right and wrong, instead of saying, well, what is true to me and what is true to you are two different things, and we're both correct because of our own journeys. And so, maybe the next step is, how do we come to a place? If we're in a place of self-love, we can accept each other even if we have differing opinions, differing perceptions, and I don't project onto you the things that are triggering me, right? So if I have unresolved stuff within me, you're going to, others are going to show it up to me, and it's going to trigger me. Like, and when I say trigger, I mean get angry, want to project onto them, want to call them names, want to, or be fearful or sad or whatever. And so when we have these themes, right, and they're all these underlying issues of worthiness and unhappiness with ourselves and inauthenticity, when we have all that kind of stuff that's boiling underneath when we're not looking at it consciously. And so we will have time after time after time have things come up and push itself back in our face to show us in the mirror what we're holding on to ourselves. And so when we still ignore it at the individual level, then it becomes community level, it becomes, national level, it becomes earthwide, it becomes, galactic. It all depends on how long we want, to ignore the issue, because we've planned it for ourselves so that it gets bigger and bigger and bigger until we finally say, okay, I'm going to address this. I'm going to look at the white elephant in the room. So we spend all this time, and when we're in an unconscious state of ourselves and we're not observant to what we're doing, we spend a lot of time putting energy to judging other people. And we're in such a deep habit of that, we don't even hear ourselves do it. One of the most basic exercises that I give in my Trinity 1 self-mastery class, and just in general, and we're doing this also in the Immunity Consciousness course that we're creating, that I'm creating with Saraswati Gavignoni. There's like this exercise of just being conscious of your own judgmental and critical thoughts and words to yourself and to other people. And so many times out of all the exercises that I give in between classes, that is the one where people come back to me and say, I was not aware of how critical and judgmental I was until I did this exercise, because I was just staying aware of anything where I was criticizing myself or others, either aloud or in my mind. And then I started writing it down, and I couldn't believe how much I was writing down. And it's to look at without judgment, because it's like, that's how we start seeing it within ourselves. Well, here's the thing. Look at how much energy people are like putting out there right now to put other people down because of their beliefs, because of what they follow. I mean, this has just been exacerbated with the political elections in the United States, but it's been going on. I mean, it's really turned itself up like 1,000 notches this year because of the coronavirus, because of the Black Lives Matter thing, because of politics and all kinds of layers and levels. And we spend so much time and energy judging that and judging others who don't agree with us, and, being righteous about, what the other people think that are not the same as us. And we put so much energy to that. We distract ourselves from looking and turning the mirror around and saying, okay, so why am I triggered by that? What is there yet to still be resolved within me to be able to say, well, it's your journey. We can agree to disagree. And I've seen things that there's like, oh, we can agree to disagree unless, except for this. And it's like, yeah, but coming to a place of unconditional self-love is coming to a place of, I'm pretty okay with who I am and where I am. And if you don't disagree with me, that's okay. I can still love you, because you're me too, by the way. You are me too. We're all like part of the same divine consciousness. And it's for us to realize that when we come to that place of unconditional self-love, and to remember that this is just, all of these are just different facets of me. Oh, hey, Raquel. Yes. And so we're all just looking at different facets of me, like as the divine reflecting back to me. So even if it is the most, and what I tell people is, It's easy to say when you're thinking, oh, like, like flowers and butterflies. But when you're looking at the person who you despise the most, who triggers you the most, to say, that's me. You're me. That person is me too. Is to say, oh, well, wait a second. If I accept all of that as me, it's for me to look in the mirror and say, well, then what is it about that person that's triggering me so badly that I'm judging within myself, so that I can shift it? Like, there are people that I've talked to that say like they're activists on certain things, right? Somebody I know who's really, really very big activist on animal welfare and stuff, and really highly was judging a lot of people, that do like the breeding factories and all this kind of stuff, or mistreat their dogs or cats and all kind of stuff, all that kind of thing. And she would post things all over, and she would go over this extreme. And I said to her, do you realize that part of the reason it probably triggers you so much is that in another life you probably abused or mistreated animals yourself? That's the response. Then you get the, what? It's like, yeah, well, when we start talking about multiple lifetimes, there's nothing we pretty much haven't done. We've been the raped and the raper, and we've been the murderer and the murdered. And so when we can start seeing that, then we start seeing it all in everybody around us. And then we start seeing the fact that we need that reminder for some reason, because everything is perfect. And Raquel says positive vibes, self-love is the best. You know yourselves and don't need others to validate you. Exactly. That is the biggest core for anyone, is to get to that place of unconditional self-love and know that you are infinitely beautiful, amazing, magical, powerful, and that once you take that back and don't give it away to other people, right? And you empower yourself to do that, you don't need it from anybody else. And when you don't need it from anybody else, then you don't need to you don't need to have the approval of other people, and you don't feel the need to judge others for their journey either, because then you just say, okay, well, that's their journey, and I honor that, even if I disagree, even if they hate me, even if they despise everything I stand for, or are scared of me, or think I'm a witch, or whatever. It doesn't even matter. You can just say, yep, okay, well, yeah, love you too, because you're me and I'm you. And I've been there, done that, even if it wasn't in this life. And I am doing that, because if we take out time, we can put it all parallel together, and then we know that we're just looking at ourselves. So the reason that I'm talking about this is, when we stop projecting all those things inside of us unconsciously, and we stop spending, look at how much time people are taking to try to take down people who disagree with them. Look at what's been going on this year, even with the virus, and how people are turning in other people for not following the rules the way they think they should be followed. And, I remember back in, I don't know, like May, when we were all still locked down, I've read that there was something like 500 complaints in my county at the police station about other people not following lockdown rules, that they followed up on some of them, and that there were so many that but they had certain conditions or certain situations that allowed them to not have to follow whatever was put out, and it was legal. But these people spent time to pick up the phone or call the police station, probably complain to their family, complain to everybody they could, to hear, I know people are very negative and fear-based and anger-based. They'll spend a lot of time complaining to other people and putting all this energy into, oh, well, these people are dumb, or they can't believe they wouldn't see this, or they wouldn't understand me, or understand this particular thing, and they're wrong, and they're so, deficient or stupid or whatever. I hear this all the time, and I'm like, but they're you. Oh, no, they're not me. That's not me. Oh, this is me, but that's not me. Yes, it is. And instead of judging it, it's like, well, then why are you triggered by that person so much that you feel like you need to put so much energy into proving that they are not you and they're not as good or whatever? Because we have then deficiencies within ourselves when we do that. So when we take that energy, instead of pointing it to things outside of us, and we instead turn it inside of us, and we say, okay, I see that trigger. So why do I care? Why do I care if that person's doing that? Not my journey. It's not affecting me. I'm not a part of it. Okay, so all right, why am I triggered? Why am I angry? Sometimes it's because I feel like, some people think, people who don't follow the rules are bad, or people who, even bigger, people who don't agree with me as to how I follow my rules are bad, because then that underneath that level is they don't validate my choices and make me feel bad about my choices. So then I'm going to take that, what I feel bad about myself, and project it onto them. That's how that works. So it's like, okay, that when somebody's like really adamant and hell-bent about somebody else not doing what they do, or that they feel like they need to do, then they complain and put all this energy into complaining about their next door neighbor or the people across the street or whatever. That's because that they have this desperate need for validation outside of them that makes them feel like, oh, I'm of value because I'm following these rules that were put out by the community, and I don't really believe that, but to make myself believe that, I'm going to then vilify everybody who doesn't follow that, right? And when you get into consciousness work, that's how you start seeing things. You can see how that whole string of energy goes. Yeah, Raquel says, not my monkeys, not my circus. Right. There's a friend of mine who says that all the time. It's one of my favorite sayings. It's true. And he goes, and I call it with his jazz hands, not my monkeys, not my circus. Exactly. And here's the thing. All you can do is send them love. If they're doing something that you don't think, the thing is, what I've said from the beginning of even the whole virus thing, right? I laugh at how many people are getting so adamant about all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, but here's the thing. Since we all have individual journeys, we all have individual choices, we have individual experiences. Again, what I think is none of your business, and what you think is none of mine, because we all have individual journeys. All we can do is share and emanate what it is we are. So when we can come from a place of love, and if everybody could do that, then we would all get along, because we would all just be effusive to each other and with each other, and incorporating with each other instead of excluding. If we take all of that energy of projecting onto others and we turn it around to say, so what is it within me to shift, to see this differently? Like, why am I triggered? Why am I putting all this energy into, how many times have you seen somebody who just spends so much time complaining, and if they would just stop complaining and take one step to change something, that they would actually resolve the whole situation, have nothing to complain about. Then the question to ask for is, what are we complaining about? Like, why are we putting all this energy to complaining and negativity, and instead saying, what is there for me? What I always say is, instead of all of this, it's like, what is there for me to do? That's not dependent on like turning in somebody else, or, pointing the finger or shooting an arrow. So what is there for me to do here? 9 times out of 10, your guidance is going to say, nothing. Nothing for you to do. Keep on going on your merry old way. Be who you are in your authenticity. Because if I'm comfortable with where I am, I also recognize that we do have individual journeys. And it goes back to, like, 5 of us might be in the same situation, and we might all 5 get different guidance as to what there is for us to do and what there is for us to be in every situation. It's the beauty of our separation and our different embodiments. And so if I make a certain choice and you make a different choice, you're not wrong and I'm not right. Like, I'm right for me and you're right for you. So we're just right, but different rights, because it's really our different truths. When we come to that, it's like, oh, what a relief. I don't have to sit and tell you what to do anymore. When we get to that place of saying, okay, well, and you ask your guidance, is there anything for me to do here? Is there anything for me to be? And like I said, like 9 out of 10 times you're going to get no. But sometimes you will. Sometimes you might just get an interjection, and that not from the ego, because if it is, this is how you can tell it's the ego. Because if the ego says you're wrong or implies you're wrong, or it would be better if you did this, or you shouldn't do this, or don't do this, you have to do this. That's all ego stuff. If you get this, well, a consideration, something for you to consider might be this, right? So, I always tell people, if you judge somebody so much for something that they do, then just don't do it. Don't employ. That's sort of where we're stuck also at a collective level, because that's where we have so many battles on who can tell what to do, who can tell who to do what, right? What can the government tell somebody to do? What can they tell them not to do? And it's like, okay, well, but if we all took responsibility for our own actions and our own reality and our own well-being, it would be a much different picture of, and that includes at the government level, that would be a much different picture for us, right? And to just preserve the right to have the choices of doing what we do that's best for us. And so, but it takes off a lot of energy, because just think about how many platforms we have. How many platforms do we have on the political spectrum that talk about, well, there's women's rights, with abortion, there's, guns rights, there's these rights, there's that's right, that those rights or whatever. We talk about all this kind of stuff. We talk about equality and everything else, and we talk about like inequalities. Pretty much we're talking about inequalities. And if we simply said, well, we're all equally divine, we're all equally perfect as being here for what we're here to be, and the only commitment for all of us is to really get to that place of authentic, unconditional self-love, because it's not the narcissistic kind. It's not the kind that says, I really don't love myself, so I have to prove that I love myself, and I have to prove that I'm worthy to be loved, so that I'm going to shove that in your face and make myself feel more important so you feel less important, so I can do that through separation. That's a narcissistic self-love. Unconditional self-love, which is like more of a divine self-love, is I am what I am, and I love that, and I'm going to embrace it. It's perfect for what I embodied myself here to be. And so when you do that, it changes the energy. It takes away a lot of energy that we put on projecting onto others. If we took all of the energy that we put into judging others, talking about how others are wrong, talking about the bad things that other people are doing, that if we took a lot of energy off of what's not in the present, if we took all the energy off of keeping grudges from the past, fearing the anticipation of the future, and we just stayed present in that guidance of what is there for me to do now, do you know how much energy we would save? We would save so much, and then we could put all that energy to nourishing ourselves, to shifting ourselves to a place of that worthiness, and presenting ourselves completely differently to the world than what we've been doing. And so, it really is that simple. It's just that we get so lost in that, oh, I'm going to spend all this time to make this. I'm going to spend all this time to try to make this other person's life miserable, and to judge them and tell them what they can and can't do, and all that kind of stuff. But then we also have judgments on ourselves. And again, it goes back to that exercise that I give people on, well, just be conscious. Take a week and take a little journal and write down every time you have a critical or judgmental thought or statement about yourself or others, every single time. And then go back in the week and go back and look over it. And like I said, people come back to me and they're like, I never realized how judgmental I was until I started writing it down and looking at that and going, wow, where does that come from? That comes from all these things that I'm talking about here. So the key right now is, because everybody's sort of like many are getting stuck in that, right? They're getting stuck in that external judgment and projection, and so much energy going to fear and angst and just resentment all across the board. There are resentments all over the place for other people not doing what the others are doing. And I'm not even saying either side of anything. It's just all of it. That's what this whole year lesson seems to be, is coming back to this place of centeredness, going within, looking in the mirror, instead of looking at everybody else, looking in the mirror and saying, what is it, all these triggers, what are they showing about me and my unhappiness, my unworthiness, and how do I shift that for myself without having to like make it a hierarchy, which is ego and separation based, but instead to then make me like, so that I can get to a place where I am so effusive with love for myself that I just can't help but overflow. I can't help but overflow and love everything else, because I just think it's all great and perfect and beautiful, even the stuff that the ego wants to deem as ugly and disparaging. So that's for your home play this week, is to step back and to look at, do that exercise. Write down in a journal like every critical, judgmental thought or statement that you have about yourself and others. And then go back and look at it and be like, okay, well, look at all the energy I now put to all those statements and thoughts. If I did not have those statements and thoughts that I had to project onto others, what else could I put my energy toward? What other productive thing could I put my energy toward? Yeah, I laugh all the time, and many people who are parents understand this. But, my kids are adults now, and I still will listen to them complain and complain and complain and complain and complain and complain about something. And I'm just like, wow, for a fraction of the energy that you put into complaining, if you took that energy and just put it into resolving the situation for yourself to the best of your ability, how much easier would that be? And then you can move on into other things. And why do you think we can't get to stuff? Is we're putting so much energy into all of this. So, yeah, Raquel says, keep the attention on yourself and take priority in your mental and physical health. Exactly. And and so keep an eye out, because Sarah C. Gavignoni and I, my partner on Ascended World on Mondays, you could go over on that page, we are doing an online class called Immunity Consciousness that covers all this stuff and does exercises and shifting and how to see a holistic version of what health actually is, so that we don't even worry about that other stuff anymore. But there's more information coming on that in the next couple of weeks. We're probably going to launch it about mid-November. Very excited about that. But these are all aspects that are coming up and very important in terms of that road. Because it is really, the road to health is coming to that place of self-centeredness in the way of self-focus. It's going within, really having a clear picture of who we are, where we're at, what to shift, what to change. And that actually really does determine how we do in our well-being. And that would change so much if we all just did that. So this week for home play, do that. Write down on a piece of paper any judgments you have for yourself or others, and just like go back and say, okay, wow, look at all that energy. And then say, okay, so do it for a week, do it for a couple weeks, right? There are other exercises to do on top of that. But I'm just going to let you sort of play with that. And then, ask yourself, so if I just put that on a shelf because that's all other people, or negativity about myself, the negativity about myself is something for me to look at. How do I shift that to a much more positive thing? How do I really come to a place of self-love? Or how do I start nourishing myself better so that I am in a much, much better place of self-love? Because that's what tends to happen, is we do self-sacrifice, then we get resentful, the well runs dry, and then we start to project on others because we're not nourishing ourselves. Lots of ways, just all the arrows point out and they end up hitting us back in the heart. So we're going to start with that. We're going to talk a lot about self-nourishment and stuff over the next several weeks, but that's also coming up in the course as well. So anyway, do that this week. And every time you see, and you start to feel yourself starting to judge others, and I'm talking about even right now in the U.S., the political landscape is very, tenuous at the very least, to say, why do I have to put so much energy to this? It is what it is. I did what I at this point, I did what I was here to do. I did it, whether you voted or not, that's up to you. And now we move on into this present. What is there for me to do here? Right? Is there anything for me to do? Probably not. Now it's for me to move on with life and to do what I can do right now. So start shifting your thoughts to that, and believe me, you'll get much better sleep at night. But play with that. We'll see you next time. Thank you for joining me. This is Angela Coulter signing off with this week's Living the Shift. Have a great week.